Hey guys, I'm getting ready to cut up some meat and some veggies and stuff, but my knives need sharpening. So figured I would show you how I do it. So use a sharpening stone. This one is, I guess, about a 6-inch stone. I'd rather have a 12-inch, what I used to use when I was a professional meat cutter. It's two-sided. You have a rough side here, a coarse, and then a fine side. If your blade on your knife, like this one, and it's really kind of hard to see, but this one's kind of in bad shape, but we'll bring it back. So we're going to start with the coarse side. Now what I have laid down is an old dish towel that my wife was going to be throwing out. It was all stained up and everything. So I kind of hijacked, use it for my base to keep the stone from moving, hopefully, while I'm sharpening my knife. I'm not going to be putting a lot of pressure. You don't want to put a lot of pressure when you're doing this. What we're going to do is just put a little bit of mineral oil on the stone. And I'm going to take my knife and just kind of slide it over the stone. This is why I have this down. It also keeps the counter from getting full of oil, and Lord help us if it would fall and hit the floor, then we'd be sliding all over the place, so that wouldn't be cool at all. Now, when you go to use a whetstone, the angle of your knife is very important. You don't want to be at a really steep angle. Essentially what you're doing is you want to make like you're taking a small slice off of the top of the stone, a very thin slice, and you want to use as much of the stone as possible and drag your knife through in each direction, applying some pressure, but not so much that the knife blade is all bent and everything. Okay, so once you run your knife across the stone a few times, what I'll do is I'll take a rag. This is a rag I keep in a bag with everything, and I'll inspect my knife blade. And I can still see from where my angle, it's kind of hard, I don't know if y'all can actually see this, but there are some slight nicks in the blade, and I want to get those out. Trying to show it head on, but it's really hard to see. Anyway, we're just doing this until we get our blade uniformly sharp on both sides. You can take a look at it again. You can kind of feel the blade. Tip not that sharp, but okay. Now, once we pretty much got the blade to where we'd like it, that's on the coarse side. Now, if your blade is just slightly dull, you don't have to use the coarse side. This is basically what you need to do. Is if you have nicks in your blade or your knife is really, really dull, then you're going to use the coarse side first, then flip your stone over to your smooth side. We'll add a little bit of mineral oil to this side. I use the back of my knife to kind of spread the oil on the stone. And then we'll take and run that knife across the smooth side of the stone. And I don't know if my microphone is picking it up. I'll stop talking for a second. But the sound is actually different because we're on the smooth side. But it is definitely a different sound. And we have now sharpened our knife. And try the old trick with the paper. I have never been able to successfully do this right. But anyway, get a pretty smooth cut out of that paper. Trying to watch the knife in my fingers more than what's on the camera, so forgive me if it's not perfect. Okay, so not the best. Let me put a little better edge on it. I've been doing this so long that I can pretty much tell by the sound of the knife on the stone, and then I can feel the blade, and if I look at it head on, I know that it's sharp. And the tip is probably the one that needs to be the sharpen the most. Sorry, I had a call came in. And pretty sharp. Now the paper trick, we'll try the paper trick again. Okay, so I got that. Now, this is my knife I use mostly for cutting meat. Now actually we'll be doing a meat cutting video soon, and I'm looking at the blade. I noticed it was pretty dull and things weren't quite right, and I see some chips in it, so I'm going to go back to the coarse side and work on this knife on the coarse side and kind of grind it down. And you don't want to put your knife on an electric grinder. You don't want to use a file on it. Grinder actually will heat the blade up and mess up the temper of the steel, and you can end up breaking the knife actually. So again, you want to use as much of the stone as possible. It's harder when you go to a larger knife. Okay, I forget exactly what this blade is. I think it's a 10-inch blade. Might be a 12-inch blade. The other one I was using, I think, is an 8-inch blade. They're both boning knives made mainly for deboning meat. I liked this one because I could debone meat and cut steaks at the same time. Saved me a lot of time when I was cutting meat for a living. I didn't have to keep switching knives. But I still use this one now. I don't debone a whole lot, but I will be deboning one in a future video, or some meat in a future video. But again, you want to use the whole stone. Small stone is not so bad, it's easy to use. On a larger stone, like we used to have when I was doing it for a living, a lot of guys would just end up sharpening right in the middle, and your stone would get a dip in the middle and kind of ruin the stone. You want to make sure you're going all the way across the stone, and you're going evenly, so that, yeah, you're going to wear the stone down. You're going to have to buy a new one at some point. I've had this one, well, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years. So they last a long time. But if you're doing a lot of knife sharpening and you're just doing it in the middle, you're going to put a dip in it, you're not going to be able to sharpen your knives properly. So, and this just is one of those things that takes practice. And once you've done it for a while, it just kind of becomes second nature on how to do this. Just making strokes that like I was just taking a small, or rather a very thin slice off the top of this stone. Now, don't know if you can see it, but right about here is a small nick in there. That's what I'm trying to get out. And you want to use oil on your stone because that will keep it from wearing out. You just get a better edge. Here's a little knife care tip. Once you've got your knives all nice and sharp, don't put them in the dishwasher. The heat from the water will literally curl the edges on these knives once they're sharp like that. Don't throw them in the sink, especially if you've got a stainless steel sink or even ceramic coated sink. Just don't throw them in the sink. Take them, wipe them off with a sponge with warm water and a little soap, rinse them off in cool water. Most knives, where they're going to hold bacteria is going to be at the hilt, right here where the blade meets the handle. Okay, that's the spot you want to make sure you get clean. The handles can get it, some of the, especially like the wooden handles or two-piece handles that have these openings. Yeah, you can get stuff in there. Just again, rinse it out with some warm soapy water, or if you really want, you take hot soapy water and dunk just the handle in, hold the blade out. But this blade hits hot water, especially if the blade's cold. You're gonna take a chance on curling that blade and dulling that blade. So don't put them in the dishwasher. Don't throw them in the sink with hot soapy water. Wash them with a sponge or a cloth with warm soapy water, and then rinse them off with cold water. And pay attention to the hilt. That's where you want to clean it. If you really want to sanitize your knife to make sure that everything is good, rule was, when at least back when I was working in the industry, was 1 ounce of bleach to 1 gallon of water would sanitize any of the equipment. And that's what we used to use. We used to spray everything down with a sprayer, and we'd mix 1 ounce of bleach into 1 gallon of water, spray everything down. When it dried, we literally would come back with mineral oil on the metal equipment and spray the mineral oil down to just keep everything kind of lubricated and keep it from rusting, which most of the equipment was stainless steel. The only way it would rust is if it got scratched. But anyway, safety now, or rather cleaning tips. And again, no dishwasher, please. That will destroy your knife. Throwing in the sink, gonna destroy your knife. Banging it against things. I have a knife that looks like somebody tried to chop a tree down with it. It's just horrible. You know, when you used to use these to make a living, you learn a lot about them and learn to respect them and take care of them. If you want your job in the kitchen to be easier, learn how to take care of your knives. That will make food prep so much easier, because you can chop your vegetables and seasonings so much easier with a nice sharp knife, that you're not having to sit there and saw, cut through, and you're mashing things. You can actually cut things. So again, these knives, these can be a big help to you in the kitchen. Okay, so I'm back. Sharpened a few knives. I actually had to leave to go pick my granddaughter up. My daughter was stuck in traffic. We couldn't get her. But I'm back. I'm finishing off a chef knife right now, on the smooth side of the stone. My favorite chef knife has mysteriously gone missing, along with my small cast iron Dutch oven. Not sure where they went to, but hopefully one day they'll turn up. But so I'm in search of a new chef knife for chopping vegetables, and I've got my choice between these three. So when I go to chop some vegetables, I'll test them each out and see how they do, but that'll be for another video. One of the things I do want to talk about is, if you have a knife, you buy a knife, a brand new one, they're usually sharpened mechanically at the factory, and microscopically on the blade, the teeth are kind of like this. Okay, as you use the knife, the teeth have a tendency to come out and the knife gets dull. If you put it on a sharpening stone, you're taking those teeth and taking them off completely. So you're going to end up with this triangular blade. They make what's called a sharpening steel. Okay, so if your knife has been factory sharpened and it doesn't have nicks in it, it's nothing, it's just gotten kind of dull, that's what this is for. This is, no, this is not the safe way to do it, but it's the way I learned when I was a butcher. Doing like this actually takes those fingers and brings them back in. So it's almost like it has a micro serrated blade. That will definitely cut better, per se. It'll hold the edge longer. I'm not gonna say it's gonna cut better, but it will hold the edge longer. Once they come out like this, they're dull, and you're trying to push it through the meat. I'm sure you've heard, and it was always that saying, a dull knife will cut you faster than a sharp knife, and it's because if you're pushing down with a dull knife, one, you're putting more pressure. Two, it has a tendency to slip, and that's when you can end up cutting yourself. So having a sharp knife is definitely a plus. It makes processing meat, vegetables, whatever you're doing, a lot easier. It's also a lot safer for you. Again, I cut meat for about, 10 years or so, all 10 fingers. Almost cut this one completely off on the bandsaw one day I was cutting pork, but they were able to sew me back up. I split my thumb in half, taking edges off of fingers, just because you're working at such a furious pace that it's going crazy. So today I've sharpened my large boning knife, my smaller boning knife, and the 3 chef knives. I just have to decide on the chef knives which ones I like. This one's really good for getting out certain types of bones and such. This one works well for bones, but this also cuts steak good, which actually the next video will be me cutting steaks. I will show y'all how to do that. if I had a really, really large piece of meat, this was the one that I used to use for that. This is a steak knife, Chicago cutlery. They usually use these on like the large, if you've ever seen a whole round steak, okay, sometimes they have them bone in with a little bone in the middle. A lot of times they're just boneless, but they're a big steak. This is the knife you would use to cut through that steak or that piece of meat to make the steak. So you know, this is really good for large pieces of meat, but that's about it. It's not really designed for chopping vegetables. Imagine I could if I wanted to, but the shape of the blade, you know, has a kind of a saber shape, and it's more designed for a downward thrust on through the meat, not for where these are designed for chopping flat. And then the other type of knife everybody should have is a fillet knife, because when you go fishing, you catch fish, you want to eat fish, it's a good knife to have. And there's a bunch of different ones. There's meat cleavers out there. A lot of people use, you know, meat cleavers for things. I tried using one for a while and just wasn't really happy. Anyway, I hope y'all learned something. If y'all like the video, please like, share, subscribe. We'll be doing more videos on things like this. I will have some meat cutting videos coming up, because I know some places you go, it's hard to find meat. And sometimes it's just a lot more economical to buy a fairly large chunk of meat and cut it yourself than to buy a couple of steaks. You might save a few dollars, but we'll talk about that in another video. All right, thanks again. Y'all have a great day.